There it goes. There you go. Woo!
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm going to be doing another DIY episode here. This time it's going to be how to make your own Mojos for striped bass trolling. Over the past 7 or 8 years, I'd say, this has become a very effective and popular way of catching striped bass up here in the Northeast. So, I love it or hate it. It is effective, it does work. And I like to use this technique just for finding fish. Once I get into fish, then I'll put the trolling gear away. But it is effective, and there's no arguing that. In this video, I'm going to be making a 12 ounce by 6 ounce tandem rig. If you watched my previous video on how to make bucktails, then pretty much the same techniques are going to be used, especially the molding process here. So I'm not going to go into too much detail as far as molding goes, but I'll let you know I am using a Do-It Molds 12 ounce and 6 ounce Spire jig that you can see here that I just put on top of the pot to start heating up. If you notice here, some of the cavities here in this mold look like they're burnt, and if you watch my previous video, I talked about using candles to get soot in those cavities, and that just makes the release of the lead easier. And here with the mold open, you can see what I'm talking about. Alright, you can see here the hooks I'm using are the Mustad 34081. Those are 12-0 big game hooks, and that's going to be for the 12 ounce Mojo. For the 6 ounce, I'm using the Mustad 34184 DT. Those are 8-0, and then later you'll see that I'm using a 9-0 of the same type for the trailer. You're also going to need to get some eyes for the 12 ounce, and unfortunately I forget what brand or size or type these are. If I can remember, I'll put it down in the description. Alright, so I've had about 2.5 pounds of lead melting in the pot now for a while, and here I'm just heating up my mold with a blowtorch like I did in the previous video, just to make sure these cavities are super hot. As soon as that lead is melted, I'm going to go ahead and start the pour. Alright, so I'm jumping ahead here a little bit to save time. What I'm not showing here is that I already poured into an empty cavity some lead, just to make sure that it's hot enough. What I have here in my right hand is the eye. This is the only step that's different than previously when I made the bucktails. You got to put the eye in separate, and then you have to put the hook into the cavity. Again, this is going to be the 12-0 big game hook, and that's for the 12 ounce. It's a little bit tricky to make sure that that eye stays in place, and a little trick that I found sometimes that helps is if you put a little bit of grease in the cavity for the eye, that'll hold that in place long enough for you to close the mold on it. And there you have it. You're making sure that the hook is perfectly aligned down the middle is very important. Alright, the main difference here obviously is the amount of weight that we're pouring. This is a 12 ounce Mojo, and it's important that you pour pretty quickly with this, otherwise you're going to get a layered effect in the jig, and it's just not going to come out right. It does take some practice, and this is one of the reasons I like to use the ladle type pot, because if you have a V pot, you're not going to be able to pour fast enough, and the jig's just not going to come out right. As soon as I pour my 12 ounce there, I go ahead and set my 6 ounce mold on top of the pot and start to heat that up. And just like bucktails, this takes a few seconds and it should harden and be good to go. And there's our 12 ounce. I'm going to go ahead and cut off the sprue and put that back in the pot. Here's our finished 12 ounce that I'm going to go ahead and hang up. I'll clean that up later with a file to make sure that it's smooth. I'm going to pour the 6 ounce now, and it's done exactly the same way, so I'm not going to show it to save time. The only difference is you're not using a separate eye, you're just going to be using the regular hook eye. Here you can see that I'm just filing down any imperfections or rough spots on the jig head before it goes to paint. And again, you're definitely going to want to wear a respirator for this part because you're putting lead particles in the air. I'm going to be using Protect Chartreuse powder paint for this. I only use chartreuse and white for Mojos. You never need any other colors. Protect does sell 1 pound containers of powder paint, and I do recommend it if you're pouring heavy jig heads like this. you'll go through a small jar in no time at all. So you really do want to get the 1 pound. And you're definitely going to need a fluid bath for this, just because of the size of the jig head. In my first video, I talked about using a blowtorch or a heat gun for heating up the jig head. And for bucktails, I used the blowtorch in that particular video. For Mojos, just because of the size of them, I'm using the heat gun. I find it easier and I get more even heat on it. So it's the exact same process. It just takes a little longer because you're heating up 12 ounces of lead in this case. And sometimes it takes more than one dip just to get an even coat. And that's what I had to do here. So I'm putting it back on the heat, and then I'm going to go back into the paint one more time. So I'm going to speed it up now just so we can get to the finished product. You see here, I actually had to dip it a couple of times to make sure I got the coverage I wanted. This is the most time-consuming part of the entire process, I would say. 12 ounces now done. I'm going to hang that up to dry. One little dip there, and then I'm going to move on to the 6 ounce, do it the exact same way. Both of these jig heads are now finished. I put them in my toaster oven at 400 degrees for 30 minutes to cure them. For tying Mojos, I prefer to use a rod winding thread. This is a Type C by Pac Bay, as opposed to the flat waxed Danville I use for tying bucktails. I just find it to be much more durable and it's more appropriate for heavy duty trolling lure. A couple things to note here. I'm using a straight nylon lure hair by Catch-All Tackle, as opposed to bucktail, obviously, that you'd be using for bucktail jigs. The other main difference is I'm using a regular bench vise as opposed to a jig tying vise or a fly vise. You're just not going to be able to use that type of vise when you're holding 12 ounces of lead. I'm sure that there's other ways to do this. I don't know if this is the best way to do it. It's just the way that I do. Nobody taught me, and I sort of had to figure this out for myself. So I'm going to jump ahead here so we can start tying. Just like before, I'm going to do a couple of wraps just to get it going. I'm just going to put an even coverage at the base of the jig head here before I start adding any lure hair. So one important tip here is you want to leave this nylon hair in the box that it came in. Otherwise, if you take it out, it's going to end up everywhere. It makes a huge mess, and it's really hard to make sure that it's all even and the same length once you take it out of the box. So I'm going to grab, I don't know how to describe it, just like a pinch. You just sort of eyeball it, and it comes with experience, but I'm trying to make sure that I have enough to go around half the jig head. And you're going to notice here when I'm tying this that it's tied reverse. It's not like a bucktail, so you're going to have more of the hair going toward the front of the jig head, if that makes any sense. Alright, but basically it's going to be put on the same way. I'm going to do one wrap around it loosely, and then I'm going to start to spread that hair out and try to get half of the coverage. Once I have it spread out enough there, so it looks like I got about half, and then I can start doing some tighter wraps around it. And this is a little bit tricky because the hair actually gets in the way, so just do the best you can for a couple of wraps, and then I'm going to get a rubber band on there. I use these tiny little clear rubber bands, and they're super helpful. Now, this is actually the point that I probably should have put the rubber band on, but I hadn't made one of these in a long time, and it sort of slipped my mind. So I ended up flipping it first to get the other side completed as well, and then I rubber band the whole thing for the final wraps. But works either way, but it probably would have been easier to just rubber band it at that point. And again, I'm going to sort of eyeball this and get enough for the other half of the coverage. You don't really have to be too concerned that it's completely lined up with the other half, because we're going to trim that later, but just make sure that you have it enough hair to make coverage all the way around the jig head. And the same thing, I'm going to do one wrap around that loosely so that I can spread it out. And right about there, it looks pretty even. Get a few more tighter wraps on it. Take a look from the side, make sure that it's going all the way around. And at this point, I'm going to put that rubber band on, which I should have done sooner, but now you're going to see that that hair is not really going to be in the way anymore. It's going to make this much easier to tie. If anybody has a better way of doing this and they want to share it with me, feel free to drop something in the comments, because I'm all ears. Like I said, I didn't really have anything to go off of with this. I just sort of figured it out on my own, and it's been working for me, but I'm sure there are better ways to do it. There's another look there from the side to make sure it's even. All right, I'm going to fast forward the rest of this now until we get to the finishing wraps. That looks pretty good right there. So I'm going to finish this. I'm going to do a whip finish just like I did with the bucktails, where I twist my fingers, go around the front of it, down, and then lock the threads in place. And do that about 5 or 6 times. Pull it tight, and then you can cut it. Or break it off, that works. Alright, and that one's tied. I'm going to trim off the excess hair here, and that's why I said earlier that it's not imperative that it's completely even on the end, because you're going to trim it down anyway to exactly where you want it. Just make sure you do both sides so it's even all around. And again, I'm going to use a UV resin to lock in my threads. Alright, so this is the final tie product at this point. All it really needs is a 9-inch shad and rigging, which I'm going to show you how to do. I'm going to do the exact same thing with the 6-ounce, but skip over it. So both Mojos are now finished and ready for rigging with shad bodies. And one thing that I find that helps here is if you use a marker and place the shad alongside the hook and see where the hook's going to come out. And I just make the little mark there on the back, and that way I can see exactly where the hook's going to come out. Now that I know where it's going to come out, all I'm going to do is push my hook through the shad body and try to get the tip of the hook to come out right on that point, that mark that I made. This is a little bit difficult to do, especially when you're using a 12-0 hook, so you really got to force it through. It helps if you twist the shad body while you're doing it. Alright, you can see the tip is going to come out right there on that mark that I made. I'm just going to slide that up the hook and on. And that's the 12 ounce. It's going to have a single hook, so that one's done. 6 ounces is going to be done pretty much the same way. A little bit different though, because I'm using a trailer hook, so we're going to have 2 hooks on there. So with the 6 ounce, I'm going to be using a 9.0 version of the same mustad hook for the trailer hook. So I'm going to start out by doing the same thing. I'm going to line up the hook next to the shad body, and I'm going to take my marker and make a little dot right there on the back where the hook's going to come out. But instead of pushing that hook through the shad body now, I'm going to use the trailer hook, and I'm going to put that into the back of the shad about, I would say, 1/2 inch lower than that mark that I just made. Alright, now that I have the trailer or stinger hook, whatever you want to call it, through the shad, I'm going to put a hook guard on that so that I don't make a mistake here and slip while putting this main hook through and end up with that in my hand. What I'm going to do now is just put this one in. You're going to try to get the tip to come out right in the eye of the stinger hook. And then slide the shad body the rest of the way up the hook, and you're done. And there's the final product of the 6 ounce. All that's left to do now is put eyes on them and rig them with leader material and a swivel. Do the eyes the same way I do any other jig head with super glue. So I'm just going to skip through that. To finish these up, I'm going to use a heavy duty 125 pound 3-way swivel and 100 pound leader crimped. You're going to need crimps and a crimping tool for this part, and I'm going to spare you all the details. There's a million videos on YouTube of how to crimp, so basically I'm going to be doing 2 arms length of 100 pound monofilament leader to the 12 ounce to the 3-way swivel. Each end is going to be crimped, and then I'm going to do a double length of that to the 6 ounce. You want the longer length of leader going to the lighter Mojo. So I'll spare you all of that, and I'm going to show you the final product now. If you like this video, if you found it helpful, if you want me to keep making videos like this, please hit the like button, subscribe, or leave a comment, and I appreciate it. Thanks for watching.